Hello, fellow fantasy sports junkies. We are here with the MFSN crew, and it is time finally for baseball. We're so excited about it. I'm wearing my Kenny Lofton shirt, Sandy Alomar, all the old Indians, Manny Ramirez, Omar Vizquel, and Albert Bell. Now, I'm here with the usual gang, and we're going to jump right into it with first base, Ross. You have assembled a top 10 list of first basemen. We're going to hear it, then you're going to highlight a couple of them, and then we're going to discuss.
We're starting with first base, my favorite position. The position I play is first base, so I'm excited to talk about this. Number one, obviously who it is. Guess, no surprise here. It's Freddie Freeman. He's the National League MVP. Jose Abreu's number two. He's the American League MVP. Let's talk about DJ LeMahieu. He plays for the Yankees. He can play other positions, but he's my number three. Paul Goldschmidt. I know you guys think I'm crazy, but I feel the St. Louis Cardinals are packed this year. They have a great supporting cast for him. I think he'll have a great, huge year. 35 home runs, 120 RBIs. Pete Alonso's my number five. Cody Bellinger. You're saying, Ross, you're insane. Why is he so low? He batted 251 last year. He's got to prove to me that he can come back before I put him higher in my list. Take that, Cody. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I call him Jr. because his dad played in the major leagues. He's up there. Matt Olsen's in my top 10. Take that, guys. 35 home runs, 100 RBIs. That's Matt Olsen for you. And Luke Voigt. I love Luke Voigt for the Yankees. Best team on paper. He's my number 9. Number 10, Met Dominic Smith. What do you guys think? Do you guys like my top 10? Let's hear it.
All right, now listen, I think you did a pretty good job with the guys that are in the list. I would shift some people around a little bit.
Tell me why. I want to hear why. You just can't say I'll shift. Tell me who. Give me a couple examples.
I'll give you exact reasons. Cody Bellinger, to me, is the number 2 first baseman. His numbers in 2019 were monstrous. I actually don't trust the stats from 2020 that much. It was a very short season. You can get a guy who just wasn't on a hot streak. I think his batting average on balls in play, Cody Bellinger, was pretty low compared to how he usually did, and he still batted 250. So I think, and he also steals bases. That's why I'm going to put him ahead of Jose Abreu. I'd also say that I'm not a huge fan of Pete Alonso. If you like Matt Olsen, wait. Don't draft Pete Alonso. Draft Matt Olsen. You can get him later. They're basically the same player as far as I'm concerned. That's what I would say. Kasey.
Or Miguel Sano if you want to wait a really long time.
Don't. No, he's a total bust. We'll get into that soon. Kasey, what do you say about Ross's list?
I like the list. I agree with you about Cody Bellinger being up. I agree with where Ross has Paul Goldschmidt for the most part. I agree with him that I think with Arenado there, it's going to be a stacked year. And Matt Olsen, I would drop in the list a little bit because of health reasons and his strikeout rate. I just can't trust him to be consistent enough to put him at that corner infield spot every day.
Okay, so then let's talk about maybe if you had to sub out one or two of Ross's, or even just sleepers that you think you can get later, or value picks. Now, again, for the viewers out there, the sleepers are the people that nobody sees coming so much, but you know they're good for various reasons. And the value picks are guys that they're not the sexiest picks, but they've got good value. You can get them at a good discount based on their rating. So, Kasey, give us some names.
Well, I'm going to give you, I'll start with my value pick, which is Anthony Rizzo. He's slipped a lot. He had a terrible year last year, as did everybody on the Cubs, and I think that was just a team in disarray. But his batting average on balls in play was down to 218 last year, whereas career average is closer to 290. Even though a lot of his other peripherals didn't change that much, he was still getting on base at a similar, the walks to strikeouts stayed the same. He obviously wasn't getting on base at a similar clip because of the batting average on balls in play. So he is somebody who throws and steals, so he can sneak into that top 10, I think, if he gets back to 80% of where he was at his prime, which he's not as old as people think. He's just been around a really long time. My sleeper picks, my favorite one is Jarrett Walsh with the Anaheim Angels, Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, I guess they are now. He pretty much supplanted Albert Pujols at first base, but nobody realizes it. Less than 200 plate appearances. I think it was 100 plate appearances last year. He hit 9 home runs and only struck out 15 times and batted 290. If you do that times 5 for like 500 at bats a year, his numbers would be 100 runs scored, over 40 home runs, and over 100 RBIs. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but his average draft position is 205. And if you can get 70% of that, that's still top 100 value in the 200. So he's my favorite sleeper pick.
Great. All right, now I'm going to talk about some busts, and then we'll jump back to sleepers and still talk about Ross's list. So, a couple of busts. Now, Pete Alonso is going to be fine. I'm not saying he's a bust overall, but I think that he's too highly rated. Like I said, you can get Matt Olson later. I really like Matt Olson. I don't know that I'd put him in my top 10, but I understand why he's there. He's going to put up monster power numbers. At worst, he's going to have a batting average drain, but, at first base, you could do a lot worse than him. Pete Alonso's not going to give you much more than Matt Olson, in my opinion. Here's another bust for you. Josh Bell is somebody who had one great year. Now, I know, Kasey, you put him on.
He had 3 great months. He didn't have a great year. If you look at his post-All-Star break in 2019, it was atrocious.
Yes, right, exactly. And that's the kind of thing you want to look for busts. If the track record's just not there, and meanwhile, you said something else that I think is a key point, Kasey. The strikeouts with Jarrett Walsh. When you see a guy who can really draw walks and not strike out, this is a guy who's going to hit for a high average. And when you're looking at first base, most of these guys don't steal bases. So a guy like that, if he can hit for average, is going to provide a lot of value. Pete Alonso is always going to be a 3-category guy. He's going to put up 3 great categories, but he's not going to be that great. Josh Bell had three great months, and otherwise not a whole lot, especially not in the power department. And if a first baseman's not hitting for power, I don't like him too much. Here's another bust, perennial bust at first base always, Miguel Sano. When he came in his rookie year, everyone was excited about him. I was excited too, but very quickly you start to see, is somebody turning the corner or not? I don't think he is. Kasey, any other sleeper or value picks you want to talk about? And then we'll move on to second base.
I think the only other one I was concerned was Ryan Mountcastle. He qualifies in outfield as well and first base in Baltimore. His numbers are pretty darn good. I mean, he gets lost in Baltimore, so you can get him around pick 150. And in Baltimore is just a notoriously easy offensive park, so it's pretty easy to project him hitting 25 to 30 home runs there. Baltimore is going to give him a chance to play every day because they're not a contending team. So he's a value pick. I don't know if he's the greatest, but he certainly has a lot of potential there.
All right, we're going to move on to second base. I just want to remind the viewers out there, if you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below. There's nothing better than a good fantasy baseball discussion between us and you. So tell us what you think. Kasey, you have the top 10 list. You were given the hardest task in the infield because second base is thin.
To get through 10 at second base is tough. But, I mean, to me, the clear-cut number one, we're staying in Atlanta. With Freddie Freeman at first base, I'm going with Ozzie Albies at second. He's dynamic. He's consistent, so I love him a lot. I'm going with DJ LeMahieu on my second base list because he is multi-positional. His value is better on your roster at second base as opposed to some of the other positions he plays. I'm going to go with Whit Merrifield third in Kansas City. I like Brandon Lowe a lot in Tampa Bay. I think he can give you a lot. He's a Terp too, and I always root for the Terps. Keston Hiura is moving over to first base in Milwaukee, but he still qualifies as a second baseman. He had a down year last year, but he still can really hit. I have Jose Altuve sixth. I know he doesn't steal anymore. I know he had a rough year last year, but he's only 2 years removed. His last full season, he still hit 30 bombs. And to get 30 or 31, to get that with a decent average at second base is crazy. Jeff McNeil, I love him. I think he's kind of like DJ LeMahieu light a little bit. He can give you a pretty similar profile. He gets on base all the time. Good average, decent power. Is going to score a lot of runs. Can knock them if they're on base. Kettle Marte is my next one. He's only 2 years removed also from what was practically an MVP type season. I think Dan wrote him pretty far in our league that year, if I remember correctly, because it's insane. You are correct, sir. I like Kevin Biggio. I have him at 9. This is where it really falls off to me. I like his potential. I don't think he's delivered on it yet. He, again, is going to be one with multi-position eligibility. That helps. And another guy who had a really off year last year, but I just think is too valuable with his multi-position eligibility is Max Muncy in LA. It's a stacked lineup. Anywhere in that lineup, you're going to score runs and get RBIs. He's got a good amount of power. And so I think his profile, when you're getting to number 10, you're pretty much throwing darts in the second base category.
I like the list. And here's what I would say. And Ross, I want to hear if you agree with this. That list it's so interesting because I was picking the sleepers at second base. And 3 of the guys that I mentioned in my sleepers are in the back end of your top 10, or at least they were. You moved Lourdes Gurriel out. And put in Max Muncy, I guess.
Yeah,
But,
and I put Lourdes Gurriel actually in the outfield, on my tiers in the outfield.
okay, so but he was on the fringe. Kayvon Biggio is another. Jeff McNeil. These guys are sleepers or value picks because they could be near the top at second base. I also think Jose Altuve, I'm not saying he is going to do it, but he could rebound in a huge way. The other sleeper that I have, and then Ross is going to bust out the busts. The other sleeper that I have, and listen, this guy could be a bust also. I wouldn't even say a sleeper. He's a value pick, is Jonathan Villar. Jonathan Villar can steal a lot of bases at second base. And you look at some of these guys, they might not put up value. Kettle Marte, I'm a big fan, but I don't know what I'm going to get from him. So I have no problem drafting him. But if you're going to do that, I'd pair him with somebody like Jonathan Villar, who you can plug in later, you can get him later, and he has value. Ross, we're turning it over to you for busts at second base. There's plenty of those to go
I want
around.
to comment about Kasey's list real quick.
Yes.
I like Whit higher. Whit steals bases. He's he probably will lead the American League in stolen bases this year. And if
not a chance.
Okay, we'll see. Did you see who won it last year? Tell me.
Adelberto Mondesi wins it every year in the American League.
Well,
it's going to be Whit Merrifield.
going to surprise some people. He'll for sure have the most stolen bases of any second baseman. Let's say that.
I think we can do the baloney on the face bet for that.
We'll see. Okay, so and I also like Marte too. I feel that last season, like you said, it was a COVID season. I feel this guy can hit 30 home runs and have 100 RBIs at second base, which is huge. I feel he should be a little higher, especially that he's multi-position. He can play other positions also. But overall, I thought it was good. Some busts. It's funny. I have some busts that are in his top 10, but I got to say him is Calvin Biggio. Biggio he's like top 50 in like every like draft analysis I see, like top 50 player. I don't get it. I really don't. I don't see his stats coming at me saying I got to draft this guy. I don't know why he's getting so much press. I know it's because of his dad, because his dad's in the Hall of Fame. Maybe that's it. I don't know, but maybe you guys can explain. Also, Altuve, you can't bang that trash can anymore, baby. You don't know if it's a fastball or curveball. So what's happening? You're not hitting the ball. Altuve bust. Goodbye. And the last one, which puts a smile on my face to say, is Colton Wong. Colton Wong signed with the Brewers during the offseason. He's no longer with the Cardinals. This guy could never hit. He was a defensive genius. If defense counts in fantasy, kick Colton Wong, but it doesn't. It's all about offense, and Colton Wong can't hit the ball. So if you're thinking about drafting Colton Wong, don't do it because he can't hit.
Now let me just make a point, and then we're going to shift to third base. When you're drafting, you want to look at the Yahoo numbers if you're playing in a Yahoo league or whatever league you're playing in. You want to look at the rankings. So, Ross, this is just a slight correction, but Kayvon Biggio is ranked 95th going into the year.
Oh, is he 95th? I saw another one. Maybe it was an ESPN thing I did. But
okay, because if he was in the 50s, I'd totally agree with you. I'd be like, that's a bust all the way.
Yep. Again, in second base, he's in the top 10s. I don't get it. There's better second basemen than him right now. I don't know why he is so
I don't even necessarily disagree. I think he's got a lot of upside, so I think that's why. But I think people are drafting him too highly. Okay, we're going to move on to third base. I had the benefit of getting to choose my top 10 list. I'm going to go through it really quickly, and then we can discuss. At number 1, I had a trouble with this. It was either going to be Jose Ramirez or Rafael Devers. So I went with Jose Ramirez, not because I'm an Indians fan. I just think it's because he steals bases, and that makes the difference. Anthony Rendon, he's now in with the Angels, but I still think he's a monster. Alex Bregman had a down year. He's my number 4. I think that he's still a potential monster. He's a very, very good player. 5th is Nolan Arenado. Now, Arenado has obviously sunk in partly because he left the Rockies and was traded to the Cardinals. The Cardinals still have a very good lineup, though, and it's a decent hitter's park. Manny Machado is my number 6. And number 7, Vlad to the bone, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I would rather have him. I think, you know what? I don't know which is deeper, first base or third base. So you're going to have to decide. When you pick him, you get him at 1, and that's great. And then you can rotate between the two. DJ LeMahieu is my number 8 at third base, but I will agree with Kasey that he's best used as a second baseman. If you're going to draft him, use second base. You can get value at third base or first base for that matter. Number 9 is a Cincinnati Red. This will be good for Ross. Eugenio Suarez. He hits tons of home runs. His average could be low. At worst, you're getting Pete Alonso at third base. That's pretty good. And actually, he can do better than that. I think Suarez is actually better than Alonso as an overall player. And number 10, Yoan Moncada, always tantalizing with the upside. I think this year, I'm not saying he puts it all together, but he'll be very solid at third base. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ross for your sleeper and value picks, but if either one of you want to jump in on my list, you go right ahead.
Your picks were good. I thought you missed the mark on a couple. I feel Josh Donaldson is still up there. I know you're saying he's old and he's hurt and all this stuff about him, but he plays in Minnesota, and those Twins did a lot of home runs there. I feel Donaldson should be in the top 10, and everything else is pretty good, but I do think.
Okay, the only thing I'll say is look how deep third base is, because I don't agree.
And Matt Chapman too. Matt Chapman's another guy. I'm going to put Matt Chapman as my number one sleeper pick, because you didn't even say Chapman's name, and I think he deserves to be in the top 10. So Chapman's
aren't
my
you the one who
one.
just said defense doesn't factor into fantasy?
Chapman hits 30-something home runs and 100 RBIs. What are you talking about?
Okay. What were his numbers last year, since that was your argument
last
with
year
Bellinger?
they played 3 months. You can't compare.
But then don't say it about Bellinger.
What are you talking about?
Apples to
last
oranges.
year they played like 20 games.
Okay. Here's my point though.
Tell me his stats. Tell me what
Ross,
he did.
Josh Donaldson and players like that. I have no problem moving guys like that in or out of this. That shows you how deep third base is.
It's really deep. And again, I like Josh Donaldson. I have an autographed bat by him right next to me. I like him a lot. I just feel that he could have Minnesota, for some reason, that ball flies out of that place. I don't know what it is, but they didn't they break a record last year or 2 years ago for the most home runs for
I think it was 2 years ago, but it was
2 years ago.
By the way, Matt Chapman in 2019 was Matt Olsen. He batted .247. He did hit 36 home runs and drive in 90 runs. But,
both Matt.
Well, that's not bad.
That's just what Matts do.
Should we figure out what Guerrero did 2 years ago? Look at his. Tell me what he did.
I'll look that up. But while we're doing this, Kasey, talk about some third baseman busts.
Well, look, busts is a hard thing to say, but I have Jose Ramirez as the top of that list because you have to take him in the first round. And with Lindor leaving, I don't know who he's going to knock in or who's going to knock him in. I think he could be one of those guys who hits 30 home runs, but 27 of them are solo home runs. I just think in first round value, you need a lineup around your slugger to give you those peripheral stats you need. I agree he's one of the best third basemen in baseball. I fear Cleveland's lineup being like it was in the movie Major League in some ways. But and my number 2 is Nolan Arenado. Again, if you have to take him in the first 3 rounds, I'm not saying he's going to be, Vinny Castilla, who once he left Colorado couldn't hit anymore. But his OPS over the last 4 years has averaged almost 250 points lower on the road than it was at home. And so, again, you're drafting somebody at that level who's got to be the aircraft carrier in your lineup, who gives you everything and fills your lineup. I don't know if he can do it. And the other one I have is another hyped rookie, is Alec Bohm, who I love. I think he's a really talented player. But I'm just going to give you the C. Rhys Hoskins as my answer to that, because if you remember what Rhys Hoskins did when he did a 2-month season, he hit like more home runs in 2 months than almost anybody ever has. And since then, he's batted like .240 and strikes out more than he gets hits. So
he's like a second-year player. I mean. And he has so much potential. He does,
but you have to take him in the top 100 picks.
Lincoln, Nebraska kid. He's in his early 20s. He's somebody that if you're in a dynasty league or a keeper league, he's not a bad pickup. I don't think he's a bust. It's too young to be.
But we're looking at this year.
Actually, that's a good point.
You can't be that young and be a bust.
No, but this is an important point. This is an important point for people watching. These are redraft values. We're going to do separate shows on keeper and dynasty. And so Alec Bohm would go much higher in those lists. And I agree with you on that, Ross. And I think Kasey does too.
I do.
So we're largely in agreement. Let's move on to shortstops. But I also did just want to say, if you're drafting, notice there's a lot of depth at third base. We didn't even talk about Justin Turner. So there's other guys out there. And there's a lot of value
there. I mean, it's a good sleeper pick, but I think...
But this is why I think you wait. You might wait on third base, not take a chance on Jose Ramirez because he does have some risk at the top and there's a lot of depth, and go for, say, Whit Merrifield at second base where it's so thin. So that's just some things to point out. We're moving on to shortstops. Ross has his top 10 list. Let's hear it. Your 10 best shortstops.
So this guy signed a huge contract during the offseason, huge potential. He's going to have a monster season this year. Kasey probably doesn't agree with me, but for Fernando Tatis Jr., because his dad is senior, I gotta say junior here. He's my number one. Trey Turner for the Washington Nationals is 2, just because the stolen bases. He's unbelievable with home runs and stolen bases. There's not many players that do that. Number 3 is Trevor Story. He plays in Colorado. Enough said. Xander Bogaerts, to say that right, Case?
You did.
Well 30 plus home runs. Enough said. Corey Seager, he was MVP of the World Series.
Wait, Ross.
Yeah.
I have to stop you because you skipped somebody on your own list. Between Trevor Story and Xander Bogaerts was former Cleveland Indian Francisco Lindor. I don't think you realize
I moved him down. I thought about it.
Oh, you moved him down.
I moved him down. He's on my list still. Don't worry. He's on my list. I love Lindor, but I feel it's the Met factor. I had to move him down because every time a player goes to the Mets, his stats go down. But we'll talk about that when I get to him. Corey Seager, Tim Anderson. He's kind of kept secret. Kasey didn't really know about him 2 years ago. Now he does. This guy is a batting champion. And if you go up to 100 people and say, tell me who Tim Anderson is, was he ever batting champion? They would say no. So what I'm saying is this: Tim Anderson's a great pick if you need batting average, and you get your 20 home runs maybe. But again, I love Tim Anderson. He's great. Draft him. Francisco Lindor is after that. We talked about him. Javier Baez. This guy had so much buzz about him, and his stats never really came through. He never was like this great player, but I still like him. But every Dominican is idolizes by this guy, so he still makes my list. Just because of that factor. Alberto Mondesi, a funny fact about him is his first at bat in the major league was in the World Series, which is crazy. But I love this kid. He's fast. He's smart. He can throw the ball. I like him a lot. And my last one who gets hurt a lot is the shortstop for the New York Yankees, is Torres. I just feel he gets hurt a lot, but I still like him. That lineup is potent. You got to have him in your...
Okay, so we talked about this a little bit before we talked about it, because shortstop is another deep position.
It's very deep, Dan. Yeah, it's
shortstop and third base are deeper than first base and second base is the thinnest, and this is something you need to know going into the draft. I'm going to say 2 things that I agree with that Ross said. Francisco Lindor, much as I love him, I'm a Cleveland Indians fan. I was very sad to see him go. I think going to the Mets is not going to help him, and I think being in New York could be a distraction. I don't know what's going to happen. He's a great guy.
I dropped him down. You saw that.
I think his numbers are going to dip. I have him in my busts, relative busts.
Ooh, that's a great one.
Nice.
Now listen, I'm not saying he's going to be a bust. I just mean for his pick. He's going to be a good shortstop. But the other thing that I'll agree with is that if you said, did Tim Anderson win the batting championship, I happen to know that, but it really does sound more like somebody who I might think, was he in my economics class? That's probably what I would think from Tim Anderson. All right, Kasey, you've got sleepers and value picks at shortstop.
Yeah, I have a few here. My value picks are I must love the Atlanta Braves offense this year, because I think Dansby Swanson is actually of great value. Over the past 4 years, his OPS has gone up every year, and he chips in steals. And so this is a guy who you can get as like the 13th or 14th shortstop off the board. So let's say you have somebody like Adelberto Mondesi, whom I'm a big fan of, but he's one of the streakiest players in baseball. For 4 months of the year, he'll look like the worst hitter, and then for 2 months, he'll be so dynamic and so good that he'll still end up ranked in that top 50. If you have somebody steady like Swanson as your second shortstop, that can really help kind of cover you during the lean months of some of those superstars. 2 other value picks are multi-position guys who I love. Tommy Edman out of St. Louis. Again, he plays every infield position but first base and the outfield. He is 1 year removed from a 300 batting average with 11 home runs and 16 stolen bases. And if you can get that with the runs scored you're going to get batting in front of Arenado, Goldschmidt, any of those guys, I think he has a lot of value. And David Fletcher in Anaheim, again, is another multi-position guy who's going to score a lot of runs and who can get some sneaky RBIs in there. My favorite sleeper pick of the entire league is in shortstop right now, and that's Willie Castro of the Detroit Tigers. Last year, people weren't aware of him. I don't even think I was all that aware of him until I looked at the stats. In 129 at-bats, he batted .350 with 6 home runs, 21 runs scored and 24 RBIs. And that might sound like a fluke, but his last year in AA or AAA in 500 at bats, he batted .301 with 11 home runs and 17 stolen bases. So this is a guy who has a track record for it, and they've handed him the starting shortstop job in Detroit, another young team. So they're going to let him learn through the season. They're not going to be a quick hook for that guy. So I think he adds tremendous value late in the draft, and you can get him he's ranked 268th is his average draft position.
Now let me make two observations on the heels of what you're saying, Kasey. First of all, you can probably get any Detroit Tiger at a discount. And sometimes
true.
You want to rely on that when you're drafting. Take players from bad teams that are actually good. Their stats are good. Go ahead and get them. The other thing I like about Dansby Swanson, if you can get a value pick that good late, then let's say you took Tatis, but then Swanson falls in your lap late. Take Swanson, trade Tatis for somebody at a position that's very hard to get. And I'm just talking in redraft leagues. In a keeper league, no. You keep Tatis all the way. In a dynasty league, definitely no. You keep him all the way. A couple more busts at shortstop. Now, listen, we talked about Tim Anderson for my economics class. I don't know that this guy is going to keep it up. I mean, Ross, I'm not saying I'm not saying it's a bad pick.
I'm not agreeing on that one. The White Sox lineup is potent. We'll talk about that on other shows.
The White Sox lineup is potent.
I disagree 1,000% on Tim Anderson. He's the real deal, 100%.
Well, okay, no, but listen. I looked at it. His stats actually last year have totally turned me around. I think what we're going to do is just remove him off the bust list. That was never said. Never happened.
Never said.
Tim Anderson, not a bust. But Javier Baez, I do think, is undisciplined. He's on the way down. That's my take. One other guy I'm not so sure about. I love Kettle Marte, but I just don't know what I'm going to get. I have him in our league, and I have to decide, is he going to be my sixth keeper or not? And I'm telling you, I'm tempted to keep him, but it gives me a lot of indigestion at the same time. Okay, guys, we did a great job, in my opinion. We'll see what the audience thinks, but I think we did a good job covering the infield, some strategies involved, some of the players involved. And we hope that you enjoyed this and got a lot out of it. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below.
And if you don't agree with Ross the Boss, please put it in the comments. I want to hear what you think. I'm very curious about my mistakes, what I said wrong, what Dan or Kasey did wrong. Put it in the comments.